Jen, I know you're out there somewhere, right? Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, bring it on. This is my wife, Jen Prue. She's a mom, storyteller, grand slam, and generally wonderful person. Oh, and the mic thing, or you want to hold on to it? And you got notes? That's crazy.
No, I don't want to use the mic. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. So, when Louis started planning this, which honestly was about an hour after the end of the last one, he asked me to tell a story. And he wanted me to repeat a story that I had already told. I had started going to the moth, and here's an issue. I don't tend to write these things down, although, as I just showed you, I did for tonight. And the other issue is that my memory is not quite what it used to be, so there's no way I can recreate my feminist rant. That's what he described it as. I think the best that I can do is try to summarize. I'm sure I said something about being a feminist. I am a feminist. I think I probably talked about being a little bit more of a feminist warrior, because as you may or may not have noticed, it's as if suddenly feminism is a dirty word, and it's not. And so I probably talked about something like that. I probably talked about trying to demystify what the word feminist means. And I'm around young students all the time, and they say those really, really smart things like, ooh, I would never be a feminist. I like to shave my legs. And so I probably said something about that, but at the end of the day, we should all be feminists, because feminism is about equality. And I would like to believe that we are raising two feminists. But honestly, that's pretty much all I can remember. And I don't think I could tell that story anyway, because as Louis was about to start to reference, the last 8 weeks have been a real roller coaster for our family. Our son was involved in an incident. We like to refer to it. Are there any children in the room? We call it the fucked up incident now. But he was trying to mediate a fight. He was trying to protect a friend. He was assaulted, and he has suffered a traumatic brain injury. Yeah. Here's the conclusion of the story. He's going to make a full recovery. So that's However, 6 days and nights in the ICU, endless days at Fanny Allen in the inpatient rehab facility. I mean, I just am not capable of making jokes out of that overall. And I'm the kind of person who really needs to make lemonade out of lemons. So what I've realized and what I want to share with all of you are some things I've learned about myself. And this is good. I'm 53 and I'm still learning, so awesome. Number one, I'm an optimist. I never, ever, ever would have described myself as an optimist before. If you asked, I would have said, oh, Louis is the one who looks at the glasses half full, and I'm the one who looks at the glasses half empty. But the reality is that I was optimistic and centered and focused, and I knew my son was going to be okay 99.5% of the time. So I hope to remain this newfound optimist as I move forward from 53 to whatever comes next. I also recognize that as hard as I've been trying over the last few years, I'm actually really capable of being present. What I mean by that is I'm a planner, like 5, 6, 7 moves ahead. I'm hyper vigilant. I know where everything is in our mess of a house. Even now, we could laugh at that. It's just, but as my friend Dee said, when something happens like this and your life goes, and that is the noise she made, by the way, you focus. And I could just be present. I could be in the moment, breathing, telling him to breathe. We did a lot of yoga breathing. I could watch him because he's not quite as chatty as I am on a good day. And so now he's in a hospital bed, and you have to watch and you have to read his eyes. And he has these incredibly expressive eyes, very watchful. And this is funny. Thinking back 21 years ago when he was born, which by the way was an arduous process, and he didn't want to leave, he liked the accommodations, but eventually the doctor tried everything, including forceps. He had to come out. And then he did nothing for 10 hours. I wrote it down, 10 hours. He didn't sleep. He didn't cry. He just laid there. And Louie and I were freaked out. This was our first child. Aren't they supposed to do something? But he's got these observant, watchful eyes. And there I am in the ICU or a hospital room, and his eyes were the same eyes. And we were present, just there. And we would do what he needed us to do. And it also led me to recognize that I was capable of noticing these moments of grace. My daughter, who was beyond composed and centered and tender and compassionate. And then the doctor would walk in and she'd be asking questions about the percentage of sodium in the IV drip. Like, this girl was everything that you could want. And I could notice it. And I could notice my husband and his tenderness and his ability to just be there. There was one night when Louie had left, like after 72 hours, neither one of us were sleeping because I see you and sleep. This is just a myth, an urban myth. And they say, oh, you can sleep in the lounge where the fluorescent lights are. And then we were in the room with him and we were being woken up as often as he was being woken up. So finally we started to take turns and it was my night to sleep in the ICU. And at about 9 o'clock or so, the nurse stuck his head in the room and he said, you have a friend here and she's got blueberries. And I said, oh, great, because that morning, Joshua had eaten something. First thing he'd eaten in days, and it was blueberries. So the minute that happened, of course, it was like, bring the blueberries, bring the blueberries. We were inundated with berries. But I said, okay, great. And the nurse, McCall Mitchell, he was amazing. He said, I don't want her here. And I said, oh, but I do. And he said, no, you don't understand. And I said, hold on. Could we just have her come in and sit by the bed with Joshua so that you and I can go out in the hall and talk about it? And he said, okay. And then we went out in the hall and we went back and forth. He was an amazing nurse. He didn't want any anxious energy, too much stimulation. We talked, we went back and forth. Finally, we got to a meeting of the minds. I then was referred to as Mama Prue. And I went back into the room, and my friend was sitting beside the bed, and I noticed that Joshua's eyes were open, and so I went over and I took his hand and I talked to him. I'm sure I stroked his head or something like that, and she quietly got it. And the next day she sent me a text, and she said, when you left the room, I was watching Joshua's vitals, which, by the way, is all we did. It was our television. And you can laugh at that because it's not exactly the most exciting thing in the world. Anyway, she said, the minute you left the room, Joshua's vitals spiked. His blood pressure went up and his heart rate went up. And then you came back in the room and you went over and you took his hand and he closed his eyes and his vitals came down. And she wrote, and I will keep this text forever, that it was the most pure and innocent thing that she'd ever witnessed. And I got it, and I was so privileged to have those moments, to see and be present. And so even though this is the worst experience you ever want to go through, I'm making lemonade out of the lemons. But there are things that I know about myself now that I knew then. I'm a person of faith. I believe in God, Mother Nature, the universe, all of it. And I am endlessly hopeful and amazed by human connections. What I mean by that is people showed up. I mean, many of whom are in the room at the right times with the right things. Tortellini salad that he suddenly would eat, or tomatoes from a garden. My friend Karen showed up one day in the ICU with these tomatoes, and when she left, Louie looked at me and he said, what are we going to do with the tomatoes? And Joshua, who hadn't been talking a whole lot and certainly wasn't eating much, said, I'd like a tomato with salt and pepper. Okay! But the way in which people showed up, our friends and our family from far away, from near, taking care of Zoe and Louie and I so that we could take care of Joshua. And there were the nurses and the doctors and the LNAs. Do y'all know about the LNAs? Maybe they make 11 bucks an hour. They are there. They are taking care of people. Unbelievable. It's 4 o'clock in the morning and Joshua's pacing, holding onto an IV pole, trying to convince me that we could really go home. And this went on. There were discussions between the 4 of us, and he mounted a really good argument. And that was great because we thought, oh, geez, okay. It's going to be okay. And you're tired, and you want to go home, and you're thinking, well, maybe if we just went home. But the LNAs are there to say, oh, I don't think you want to stay. Why don't I get him an ice pack? Or why don't we try this? Or they'll even say things to you like, you look like you could use a shower. Now, maybe it was because I hadn't showered in days and I smelled. More so, they're really there to just take care of you. So people we knew, people we didn't know, and I'm just thankful. So, yeah, I want to thank my community, our community, the circles of people, and the smoothies, and the food, and the love, and the hugs, and